These 8 players are going to help you win your fantasy football leagues this year. We are going to break them down on today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Welcome in. My name is Lucas Wenzel, and as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts Cameron Lawrence and Tyler Platt. Fellas, how we doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Doing great.
And we are even joined by a very special guest. Andrew Erickson of FantasyPros joins the show tonight. Andrew, we are absolutely stoked to have you on. Where can the people find you? I mean, you're doing awesome work over at FantasyPros. Where can the people find you? Because we want to make sure that they can access all of your work as well.
Yeah, so I'm on the aforementioned FantasyPros. I'm on the flagship podcast over there. You can find me on X at Andrew Erickson _. Same thing on TikTok, same thing on Instagram, same thing on whatever social media the kids are using these days. So that's just, and then on FantasyPros, that's where my written content is, alongside the audio, and also on YouTube as well, FantasyPros, and actually Betting Pros too. I'm dabbling into the betting streets a little bit more now this year. I'm from Massachusetts, so Massachusetts finally got woke and decided to legalize gambling. So been having a lot of fun with that. Looking forward to NFL. I don't like betting NFL preseason. I have not been successful with it, except Ravens money line. That was a sweat. People watching the Ravens game. That was a big sweat. But having a lot of fun over at Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros.
Awesome. Send some of that Massachusetts love over to Minnesota. We need to get things straight over here. We're grateful for what we have with partners like Underdog and whatnot, but dabbling a little bit on FanDuel wouldn't hurt anybody. But anyways, we're going to break down 8 league winners in your fantasy football leagues this year, and I'm not going to waste anybody's time because you're here to hear all of our thoughts and analysis on each of these players. So let's dive on it. So, Andrew, I'm going to have you kick us off here. Your first league winner for the 2023 fantasy football season is someone I am absolutely in love with, and I am so happy that you chose to talk about them on our show. Who is your first league winner for 2023?
For me, it's going to be wide receiver Jeudy. Now, drafting the Denver Broncos wide receivers didn't work out last year, especially with Courtland Sutton. But with Jeudy, Jeudy broke out at the second half of last year. When he was healthy, finally playing with Russell Wilson during that last stretch of 6 or 7 games, I mean, he was an absolute monster. If you look at what he did during his last 6 games, 25% target share, 5th in receiving yards overall. From week 10 onward, he led all wide receivers in yards per route run, which is like the holy metric of any receiver metric that someone can list. Be like, yards per route run, oh my God. Like, that is like the skeleton key for wide receivers, especially projecting them in fantasy. So Jerry Jeudy's checking off that box. Final 5 weeks, weeks 14 onward, wide receiver 3 overall in points per game. Wide receiver 4 in full PPR. So this guy flashed a top 5 fantasy ceiling and is available routinely in round 4, despite the fact he's the clear-cut #1 wide receiver on the Broncos. Just look at the preseason. Only wide receiver in the starting offense to run a route on 100% of the dropbacks. Caught a touchdown from Russell Wilson. Like, the connection is there with Russ that I don't think is necessarily a lock for some of these other receivers that go in that range where Jeudy is drafted, where we're projecting, oh, it's a new receiver and a new quarterback. And it's like, yes, when you put 2 and 2 together, okay, it should work out. But we've already seen it with Wilson and Jerry Jeudy. We've seen them play together and be successful. So I don't think it's a stretch to look at Jeudy. It's like, dude, this guy's gotten better every single year of his career. Like, every single year he's gotten better. Last year, he finally was a top 24 wide receiver. You know who he had more points than last year? He scored more points than Chris Olave. And yet you can get Jerry Jeudy so much later than Chris Olave. So for me, I'm looking at Jeudy, former first-round pick from Alabama. Like, I feel like the planets are finally starting to come align for Jeudy in this offense. Sean Payton taking over at head coach. So for all those reasons, I'm all in on Jerry Jeudy this year.
I mean, this offense literally cannot afford to sputter 2 years in a row with all the talent they brought in, with all the investment that they put into the offensive line, trading first-round pick for Sean Payton. As you said, this offense cannot afford to sputter. Cameron or Tyler, your thoughts on Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah, I've started to come all in on Jerry Jeudy as well. Lucas has really worked his butt off trying to convince us this offseason. I started as a Jerry Jeudy doubter is the way that I'll put it. And over just looking at what he did to end last year, looking at, how the offense is going to look this year, it is really hard to dislike Jerry Jeudy. And like you said, where he's going in drafts right now, there's a lot of wide receivers that I'm kind of like, I don't really want them. But Jerry Jeudy's sitting right there every single time. I'm like, I'm going to take Jerry Jeudy more often than not right now.
He has a ceiling that not a lot of players have in that 4th, 5th round range. That's what wins you your league, is ultimate ceiling and upside. So there is not a whole lot to dislike about Jerry Jeudy, because we thought Courtland Sutton could be the one last year, and after he just fell flat on his face, it's Jerry Jeudy, and that's really about it for number 1 options.
I mean, Sean Payton would have to be blind to see that Jerry Jeudy is not the best wide receiver on the, that's what I keep coming back to. Sean Payton is smart enough of a head coach that he will make sure Russell Wilson gets the ball into his best wide receivers' hands, plain and simple. Jerry Jeudy, absolutely, I believe, is a league winner this year.
I think go for it. For me, the last part on Jeudy that I try to compare to is, where were we drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown last year? Remember how Amon-Ra St. Brown had this 6 stretch of games to end the year, and then we're like, let's draft him round 5? That's what it feels like with Jerry Jeudy. It's like, dude, what else do we need to see? He was a wide receiver 1 with Russell Wilson during the last 6 weeks of the year, and it's like, all right, round 4. Okay. So I think even if he doesn't, melt faces necessarily, is he going to be a bust? He wasn't a bust last year, and that team sucked. He was a top 24 wide receiver last year, which is really close to where he was being drafted last year. So right now, wide receiver 21 last year, I think that's exactly where his ADP is. Wide receiver 21. So I think you're getting him at his floor. So worst case scenario, you just get what you drafted. Not a lot of risk involved. Best case scenario is, like we've laid out, top 5 fantasy wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of looking at end of season production and seeing how ADPs are differentiated coming into each year. And there's obviously different concerns around each player, but it's tough not to look at that stretch from Jeudy and think the way is literally up. It cannot get worse than last year. And if it was the wide receiver 21 last year, you're drafting him at what probably will be his floor this year. 100% in agreement there with Jerry Jeudy. Cameron, I'm going to kick it over to you for your first league winner. There's actually a lot of discussion around this player this off season. Question marks around the offense, who's going to be featured, what roles is everyone going to have, but make your case for your first league winner in 2023.
Mine is Aaron Jones, and I'm going to give credit to Lucas on this because a lot of these stats that I'm going to drop are from Lucas. So I don't want to act like I just came up with a lot of these. I mean, obviously, it's nothing world shattering either, right?
Thanks.
I'm going to say,
gee whiz.
I don't want to start out with the fact that he had a career high of 72 targets last year and act like that's some mind boggling stat, right? But Aaron Jones, to me, has 2 big buzzwords that we like with running backs. He catches a lot of the receiving work, and then he's efficient. And he has seen over the last 4 years at least 63 targets in each of those years. That's something that I was trying to give you credit for there, Lucas. That was one of your stats. He has 72 targets, and if I'm not mistaken, the Packers have the most or top 3 most vacated targets in the NFL this upcoming season. Obviously, Rodgers is gone, so that's going to change the receiving game a little bit. But let's be honest, these Packer wide receiver room and tight end room as well is unproven at best. There is, if you want to make the argument for Christian Watson, I know you guys do, you can make the argument for Christian Watson. If you really want to try and make the argument for Romeo Doubs, you can. But we're not sitting here saying they're each going to get 150 targets, right? Jordan Love is going to need to throw the ball, and Aaron Jones, to me, is probably the best guy to throw the ball to. And the second part is efficiency. I think a lot of times, at least for me, when I'm thinking of running backs, I think of Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook similarly, just because, they're drafted the same year. So you're thinking they're kind of on the same timeline. We saw Dalvin Cook last year really take a step back, where Aaron Jones averaged 5.3 yards per carry. He had 213 rush attempts and had 1,100 yards. Every single year of his career, or the last 6 years, he's had at least 4.6 yards per carry. 4 of those years, he's averaged at least 5.3. it's just the efficiency got better last year, and we think he's regressing because we look at fantasy points a lot. Obviously, he was running back 2, running back 5, or running back 5, running back 2, then 9 and 10 these last 2 years, and a big part of that has just been touchdowns. And I'm not saying he's going to get 16 touchdowns like he did in his running back 2 season. I think that'd be ludicrous to assume that just because of where the offense is at. But at the same time, I don't think that Aaron Jones has fallen off completely. And right now he's going as the running back 17. That's what I can't wrap my mind around. Okay, he's been a top 10 back each of the last, I think, 4, maybe 5 seasons even. And he was super efficient last year. He was catching a lot of passes. His role hasn't gone away. He was the clear running back 1 over A.J. Dillon. Obviously, Dillon's going to have those short yard situations just because, his body alone. But Aaron Jones was still extremely involved in this offense. Aaron Jones was still extremely efficient. And now all of a sudden we want to go, let's draft him 7 spots lower than where he finished last year. And I do got to say, I think the biggest part of that was just his inconsistency, week to week. You look at his numbers. He had, I think 5 games in single digits, and he had a couple of games 20 plus. So I do understand that. But at the same time, at the running back 17 position, I want to grab a guy that can go out and win me a week. And I think Aaron Jones can do that.
Yeah, Andrew, any thoughts from you immediately on Aaron Jones being considered as a league winner in fantasy football this year?
Well, I think that it definitely helps him in PPR formats because I think that the receiving role is really good for Aaron Jones. I think it's not going to go away just based on the lack of, established pass catchers in that Packers offense. So I think that's a really good point to bring up. But, there's a reason why he's not scoring as many points because he's not scoring touchdowns. He's got 6 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons of rushing touchdowns because A.J. Dillon has been their red zone running back for the past 2 seasons in the second half of the year. So, that's where I get concerned. When the chips are on the line in fantasy championships, is it Aaron Jones, as the featured back? As a guy who's going to be, I think he's going to be turning 29 this year. Either 29 or 28. Or he's 28 right now, so he's going to be turning 29.
Yep, will be 29.
So, again, he's not an old running back, but, you're bringing up how efficient he has been. Eventually, he's not going to be efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it's going to come down, and that's going to happen as he gets older, not as he gets younger. Yeah. So, the thing with me with Jones, if he falters in any way, they're giving the ball to A.J. Dillon more. He's in a contract year. This is A.J. Dillon, and then he's gone. So, I've done a lot of research with league-winning running backs where guys in contract years, coaches give the ball to a lot because they're like, we got to use him, or else then he's going to go sign with another team. So, for me, A.J. Dillon, I think, has a bigger role in this offense, especially because it can be featured around 2 running backs with an inexperienced quarterback under center. How much of Aaron Jones playing so much more than A.J. Dillon the last 2 years has been because of Aaron Rodgers, not because of Jordan Love? What if the coaching staff was like, no, we really would rather have A.J. Dillon running the ball in Green Bay in December, take advantage of that? That's not something hard to buy into. So for me, especially with the fact that the red zone usage has been A.J. Dillon's, that's the one concern for me with Aaron Jones as a league winner because, especially in half PPR, you got to score touchdowns. In PPR, I like the bullish case on Jones more because I think he's going to offer that stable floor as a receiver. But, if he's not scoring 5 touchdowns, he could get 2 touchdowns. That's what he scored last year, I believe. Yeah, he scored 2 rushing touchdowns last year. That's, talk about league-winning running backs, he only scores twice. It's that's a hard sell for me.
No,
go for it, Cameron. Yep.
No, that makes sense perfectly. I do want to add, he did have 11 receiving touchdowns over the last 2 years as well. So they do use him in a different way. Obviously, you could, chalk that up to Aaron Rodgers just being crafty in the red zone. But I do think that is partly just because that's how they use him out of the backfield, trying to get him open. And I think for me, it does a lot rely on the receiving back. When I was going into this, I am thinking a lot through, a PPR lens of, why I'm calling him a league winner. And yeah, I understand the case for A.J. Dillon. I have A.J. Dillon on my dynasty team. I went and traded for him this offseason. So I like the role as well. I think they can both be productive. So maybe it is a little bit of a stretch to say league winner. But I do think that at the running back 17 position, he is going to, at least I feel, outproduce that pretty well.
We'll keep things moving along here, and we'll stay in tune with the running back position here. Ty, I'll kick it over to you because your first league winner also comes at running back, and it's somebody that I think we are all bought into here. Well, at least us 3. I won't speak for Andrew, but us 3 are bought into here. Who is your first league winner?
Oh, it's a guy that I have just had a soft spot for all offseason long. It's Tony Pollard. Okay. And I could keep this to 30 seconds by just saying there is no one else in this backfield. And Tony Pollard is on his 1-year franchise tag. So the Cowboys are going to get the most out of him. It's really that simple, right? But I do want to take a little bit more in depth of a look, because the first thing that I think of whenever I talk Cowboys is the loss of Kellen Moore, right? If Kellen Moore is such a big ad for the Chargers, it's a huge loss for the Cowboys then, right? So it gets kind of tricky, right? But the thing is, when your head coach in the offseason has been chatting the entire time, like, we want to run the ball more, and you did run the ball like a ton, even with Kellen Moore, that makes me feel a little more optimistic. And then especially it was then confirmed pretty much then with Brian Schottenheimer being promoted to offensive coordinator, right? With his history in Seattle and stuff. So that's the first thing. Second thing, just some of his metrics from last year are just lovely. 4th in yards per route run. So he's running actual routes and not just screens and dump offs in the backfield. He's 5th. He was 5th in yards per touch. He was 3rd in breakaway runs. He was 8th in yards created per touch. He was 10th in fantasy points per opportunity. And the big stat for running backs, in my opinion, is yards after contact per attempt. And he was first of all running backs with 60 or more carries. So the guy will get a ton of work, doesn't go down easy, and gets receiving work. It's kind of like a holy trifecta almost. And I think one of the biggest arguments people have against Tony Pollard is like, well, he's never really been a guy, or he's never handled a full workload before. And every single time I hear that, I go, right, because they had a $90 million Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield with him. Like, they're not going to give Zeke the ball. So I think I think people try to dig a little too much into finding something wrong with Tony Pollard. Like, for me, Tony Pollard, along with Nick Chubb, are my dark horse running back 1 overalls this year, because I just think the ceiling is so high, and they do have a relatively safe floor. And I've said this in previous episodes, even if the Cowboys bring in another running back, like, they're not going to bring in Zeke anymore. They're not bringing in Dalvin Cook, but let's say they bring in Kareem Hunt. Tony Pollard has finished in the top 10, and actually where he's going in drafts right now, with another running back in his backfield. So it's not like he's going to completely bust out of a running back 7 draft capital that you're taking him at. So every single time I'm in a draft, and if I can grab Tony Pollard in the 2nd round, because that's where he's going, I'm doing it every single time.
I mean, if a guy has "feed me" tattooed on his stomach, they're probably going to feed him the football. And now that guy isn't there anymore, that's very loose logistics, obviously. But Andrew, Cameron, any thoughts that you both have on Tony Pollard for this year?
I agree.
I concur. So for me, I think it's as simple as, guys, we've been waiting for Tony Pollard to be the Dallas Cowboys starting running back for so long. And if we finally get it and people are trying to poke holes in it, it's like, guys, just be happy.
What are we doing?
Like, just be happy that we get friggin' Tony Pollard, like one of the most efficient running backs in NFL history, in a full-time workload as a Dallas Cowboys featured running back. Like, it's the same thing with Nick Chubb, who you also mentioned, because Kareem Hunt's gone. Like, we're finally going to get 3-down workhorse Nick Chubb. And people are like, well, like, Jerome Ford's a thing. And, like, they're going to bring in somebody else. It's like, guys, like, stop. Just be happy that we're finally getting these sick, efficient running backs in full-time roles, and just draft them in fantasy. And, like, don't overthink it. And I think, too, the thing with Pollard is he was so good on a limited touches that he forced Jerry Jones's hand. The guy who signed Zeke to this giant contract was like, guys, like, we're paying Zeke so much money, but, like, we have to play Pollard. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we have to do that. And that's the biggest thing I want to separate Pollard from, like, Madison. Right? People talk about Alexander Madison, where it's like, no, well, never, ever, at least I never was out here being like, free Alexander Madison, Dalvin Cook sucks. Like, no, that was never the case. And the Vikings paid Dalvin Cook. Similar situation. But we were never out there vying for Madison to get touches. But we were definitely doing that for Tony Pollard. So, yeah, I'm all in. I know Derek Brown has, like, Tony Pollard as his RB1 overall. I mean, I like him in round 2, and even, like, I want to say at the end of round 1. I mean, look, last year, right, if Tony Pollard or Zeke Elliott had, like, tore his ACL in, like, August 20th or whatever, Tony Pollard would have been a top 5 running back. he wouldn't have been a top 5. He would have been a top 5 pick overall. Yeah. And he's not even going there. So honestly, until he's like a top 5 pick overall, like I think you should just still draft him. I think he's going to be a value beginning of round 2, end of round 1. Like he's a top 5 running back for me. So yeah, and I think that's where ADP and ECR is ultimately going to settle in on Tony Pollard.
I mean, the fact that you can get him in the middle of your second round right now, and it's like you're pairing Tyreek Hill and Tony Pollard with your first 2 picks like that.
You get Nick Chubb and Tony Pollard.
All right, you could do that as well if you really want to double down, double hero RB. You go have yourself a day and do that
for sure. I think last thing I want to say is that's where I think you need to be careful sometimes. Like Sleeper right now, he's going off as he's a 24th person in ADP.
Oh,
like so you need to understand just because he's there. Just because Sleeper has him there doesn't mean that if I'm at the 3rd pick of the 2nd round, I shouldn't take Tony Pollard here. That means, hey, he's still a great value even here. So I don't know. That's where we really have to be careful with ADP sometimes because they just bury some people and they chuck some people way up the board. So ADP isn't everything.
I mean, right. We're getting Mahomes at the end of round 1 and Tony Pollard is going at the end of the 2nd. Like someone make that make sense to me, please. Please.
Draft Tony Pollard, please. Do yourself a favor this year. I think you should also do yourself a favor and draft my first league winner. Now I get he's not established in the league yet, and I get it. Rookie wide receivers typically don't get off to blazing hot starts unless if their names are Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, wide receivers of that flavor. And I know Jordan Addison, a lot of people wanted him to end up on the Chargers or the Bills, but like, honestly, like this is kind of one of those, again, we should be thrilled Jordan Addison landed on the Minnesota Vikings, who were 3rd in pass play percentage last year, 3rd in pass plays per game, 2nd in red zone passing attempts, 2nd in passes inside of the 10-yard, like high opportunity for fantasy points for Jordan Addison. Adam Thielen leaves town as Minnesotans. That breaks our heart, but at the same, it was time for Adam Thielen to go. But anyways, he departs. Now his role wide open. Finished as a wide receiver 30 last year, might I remind you, and Addison's going as the wide receiver 38 right now. But Thielen, quietly a ton of opportunity last year. 2nd in routes run, 5th in red zone targets, 5th in red zone receptions, 5th in receptions inside of the 10-yard line. Now, I'm not saying Addison's a 1-for-1 there. That's just not realistic, but I think we can all agree at this point in their careers, I personally would rather have the young, explosive rookie running all those routes than an aging Adam Thielen, who talented in his own right, but let's get some fresh legs out there and first-round talent, Jordan Addison out there running those routes. And if Kevin Connell lets Kirk throw it all over the yard again this year, another top 3 passing rate season, like Addison, I think he quietly possesses like top 24, can I go all the way to top 20? Is that allowed? Like, I think there's that sneaky upside there that you're getting darn near the wide receiver 40. He could double where he's going in drafts right now, I think. Like, we've seen Kirk support 2 top 15 wide receivers in 3 of his past 5 years. I'm going to steal that stat from Alex Caruso. He supported 2 top 15 wide receivers in 3 of his 5 years with the Vikings. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Addison to have this incredible finish this year. And the wide receiver 37, that's where he's going in drafts right now. It's just far too low of a price tag for me right now. And I get we need to differentiate league winners from ADP values, but at the same time, when you're getting somebody like a Christian Kirk was going around this range last year, and he finished as a wide receiver 12 last year. Like, I don't know if Addison can get all the way up to 12, but I certainly think he can get inside the top 20, and that's someone you're getting as an absolute steal in that range of your drafts right now. Lay it on me. Am I too high on the rookie Jordan Addison?
I don't think so. I mean, well, okay. I think, like, obviously, if we're saying he can finish top 12, my worry with Jordan Addison is, especially if we're comparing red zone to Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, even in his old age, was a red zone route technician, right? I mean, he was one of the best red zone threats year after year, and he had that connection established with Kirk. But at the same time, like, the opportunity is there. We know that Jordan Addison possesses a ton of skill, so it's just how quickly can he put that, can we put that all together? Because like you mentioned, with rookies, it can take time. So if it starts happening in week 3, then yes, he could be there. But if it does take a little more time, that is the risk you're running with a rookie wide receiver.
I think for me, there's 2 things I go to right away. One, it feels like the Vikings coaching staff are pretty conservative when it comes to just kind of throwing their rookies into the fire a little bit. So I don't know exactly how hot of a start we can get out of Addison, right? And that's probably why he's going so late into drafts. And so maybe it's a better. I might see him more as a buy low that can win you your league than just a draft and a league winner right. The other part of it, though, I have to give some respect to TJ Hawkinson, right? Like I have to, I can't decide between TJ Hawkinson or Jordan Addison to be pretty much the number 2 option in this offense. And Kirk showed a ton of trust with TJ Hawkinson right from the get-go when Hawkinson got to Minnesota. So there's question marks with Addison, but I do want to reiterate, he's well worth drafting this year, right? Like he's not someone to avoid at all. I don't know if I can go to the extent of league winner myself. And that's just a personal thing. I'm not trying to take you down, Lucas, but that's just me. That's just me.
Andrew will take me down though. He's got that look in his eye that he's like, no, that's bad.
No, I mean, I think that I like the case for Addison there in terms of, does he fit the profile as league winner? Like maybe not, because I think with a lot of these players, it's just, okay, how well did you perform during this pocket of games? Like if Jordan Addison is a top 12 wide receiver from weeks 13 through 17, then yeah, he's a league winner. Like it's really that simple. And based on the context of the offense he plays in, that's well within his range of outcomes, I think, more so than a lot of other wide receivers that just don't play in offenses that are this pass happy and this pass friendly. And you look about TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson. One of these guys goes down. Okay, sick. Like Jordan Addison is like wheels up, and you don't have to pay a lot to get him. So I think that he's definitely someone that you could beat his ADP for sure. I think that rookie wide receivers are just in general good bets to just smash their ADP. Yeah. Like I would draft all the first round rookie receivers blindly. Like I would draft all of them because even if, for example, like 3 of them bust, the one that hits is going to hit in such a big way based on what rookie receivers do that it's going to make up for all the misses anyway. It's like with Garrett Wilson last year, if you drafted him. It's like you could have drafted horrible wide receivers throughout your draft.
Yeah. But
if you just picked him, you could have drafted him and Elijah Moore, and it didn't even matter that Elijah Moore was an epic bust because you got Garrett Wilson. Right. So definitely in on drafting Jordan Addison and seeing how it plays out, because I think that, maybe week 1 he comes out isn't necessarily like, okay, he's going to be a league winner in week 1, but most rookie receivers aren't. I remember a trade I made last year. I traded Tyler Boyd to get Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson was going through some weird stretch of games because they had backups in and he couldn't be trusted. But it's like, at the end of the day, like Garrett Wilson destroyed Tyler Boyd. And I bring this up and you're like, how did he do that? Are you a wizard? It was like, no, it's just his stock was really low. So I traded for him. And I think it's something to keep in mind. So even if you don't draft Jordan Addison, it's like, hey, who has these rookie receivers after a bad game? Go acquire them because it only takes a couple games for them to be a league winner when it matters most.
And I want to point us back to Justin Jefferson's rookie year too. I'm not saying Jordan Addison is going to go ahead and finish as the wide receiver 6 overall with 1,400 yards on 128 targets, right? But Jefferson started off that season slow, and once by the end of the year, he absolutely won you leagues that year. So I don't. Again, I'm not advocating for Jordan Addison to automatically finish top 12, but when we go down the stretch of the season, if he really starts getting in sync in this Vikings offense, I think the upside is absolutely there. Let's take a quick break, and then we will come back with another round of league winners for you all. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Artie, we are back, and we are going to go around the horn again with another round of league winners. We'll keep these a little bit shorter here, fellas. So, Andrew, I'll kick it back to you. Let's talk about a position we actually haven't talked about yet in your second league winner for 2023.
I'm going to the quarterback position here with Deshaun Watson for the Cleveland Browns. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to bring a quarterback to the table here, but a lot of times there are QBs that are league winners just because of how late they get drafted. And I know that quarterbacks are being driven up the board more aggressively than they have in years past. So where's the edge? Where's a late round quarterback that could be top 5? And for me, it's so easily Deshaun Watson, because every single year he's played at least 15 games, he's been a top 5 fantasy quarterback. And the biggest thing with Deshaun Watson that I think is just being so underreported is the guy is still running the ball like crazy. He's a rushing quarterback that people don't want to draft. Or I understand why you may not want to draft Deshaun Watson for non-fantasy football related items. But if you were in the business of winning fantasy football leagues, I think Deshaun Watson plays an integral role in that. This team is loaded with receiver weapons. Like, look at any breakout player. I can guarantee you're going to find Elijah Moore on there. You're going to find Nick Chubb. Like, there's a lot of reason to be excited about this Browns offense. And if this Browns offense is as good as we think it could be, then Deshaun Watson's going to have a big part of that. And when he was rushing the ball last year, he was averaging nearly 30 rushing yards per game. That was inside the top 5 among quarterbacks last year. In the preseason, we saw some action from him. He had, 5 dropbacks? He rushed on 3 of them. Like, he's going to run the football. And I know that people are afraid of him because of how bad he was as a passer last year, but we see this all the time. There are quarterbacks that are horrible passers that still hit because they run the ball. So I'm not asking him he needs to be 2019 Deshaun Watson when he led the NFL in passing yards. If he can be okay with the good weapons he has as a passer, plus the added layer on of rushing production, Deshaun Watson's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback that you don't have to pay a top 5 price for. So not only do you have an elite quarterback that can stack up with the Watson or with the Lamar Jacksons, the Mahomeses, the Justin Herberts of the world, but you also have a stacked lineup of running backs and wide receivers that you were able to draft while other teams are drafting quarterbacks. So that's why Watson checks off the box for me as a league winner, because of his performance, and the lineup that you can build around Deshaun Watson is going to look like a super team.
Like you said, I think we want to hope and wish that Deshaun Watson could be the former top 5 self that he used to be. But now with all the question marks around him, like, that's still the ceiling for Deshaun Watson. Like, that is still within the range of outcomes, but you're just getting essentially a fairly big discount on him with all the question marks from last year. Any quick thoughts from either Cam or Ty?
He is my top drafted quarterback right now in Underdog. I think I have him in like 23% of drafts right now, and it's because of where he's going. The fact you can wait till like the 7th, 8th, 9th round to get him is just ridiculous when he has that upside. And unfortunately, if you're trying to draft your team based off of morals, you're not going to be able to draft like a third of the NFL. So I'm sorry. We're really just in this to try and win your league from a on the field standpoint.
We'll keep it moving here, Cam. I'll kick it over to you for your second league winner. You're actually going to stick at the running back position for your second one as well. And this is a player who, again, all 3 of us are on the record saying that we absolutely love this player this year.
Yeah, I've probably talked about Jahmyr Gibbs more than any other player this summer. I understand he is a smaller back. He is just right around 200 pounds. I think they list him at like 199. He does have David Montgomery in the backfield, who they just paid, who is stepping into a Jamal Williams role, which saw a ton of touchdowns and a ton of carries last season. So obviously doesn't sound great, but I am here to tell you that fortunately it is possible to finish top 10 without leading your team in carries. In 2017, 2 rookies did it, Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey. Not yet calling Jahmyr Gibbs, Alvin Kamara, and Christian McCaffrey. Do want to point that out there again, but they didn't lead their teams. Alvin Kamara had Mark Ingram. CMC had both Cam Newton, and I think it might have been Jonathan Stewart. I don't remember who was the lead back at the time off the top of my head. I did know like 3 days ago, but now I don't remember. James White was top 7 in 2018, despite not leading his team. Austin Eckler was top 4 in 2019. I know that James White one just throws me off every single time. It's just such a gross name to think of as a top 10 fantasy back. And then you saw Swift actually in 2021 finished top 10 in points per game, despite having less carries than Jamal Williams. And Tony Pollard just did it last year, despite splitting with Zeke. I also think we need to factor in the draft capital. Each of the last 6 players drafted top 12. Trent Richardson, Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, and Saquon all finished top 10 their rookie seasons. And, I mean, Trent Richardson's in that one, and that is such a gross name. So, again, draft capital does matter. You can say that you don't want it to, but if you take a running back in the top 12, especially in these last couple of years, you want to use him. And last season, at Bama, Gibbs, I mean, he proved that he's a good runner as well. I mean, averages over 6 yards per carry, had just under 4 receptions a game and 114 scrimmage yards per game. And now he steps into that DeAndre Swift role, which saw only about 40% of snaps. And yet Swift is still on pace for over 125 attempts and 85 targets. And every player since 2017 to hit that has finished top 10. So I just think there's so much pointing Gibbs to be in top 10 this year. And, he's stepping in that Swift role, which in 2021 saw Swift finish really well, except for injury. And this coaching staff didn't even like Swift. So the fact they really like Jahmyr Gibbs makes me, just helps me kind of get over that edge of being all in on Gibbs this year.
I am praying they don't put some crazy DeAndre Swift voodoo on Jahmyr Gibbs this year. I would be absolutely crushed as a DeAndre Swift truther last year. Andrew, I don't mean to keep defaulting to you, but Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that we've talked about so much on our show and our channel already. What are your thoughts on Jahmyr Gibbs going into 2023 for his rookie year?
I think that there's never been a cheaper rookie running back selected in the top 12 that you could draft in fantasy because he goes in the 3rd round. It's like, when has this ever happened before where a guy he is a better price value than Bijan Robinson is.
Yeah.
Like among the rookie, the only reason he's going this late is because of Bijan Robinson just existing. Because Bijan was, he was the guy that got picked first, 4 picks ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs, even though there was NFL guys like Gibbs is better than Bijan, which I don't necessarily agree with. But when you're considering the prices, Gibbs in round 3 versus Bijan in round 1, especially in full PPR, like whatever Gibbs's prop is going to be opening night against the Chiefs, it's going to be like 2.5 receptions or something. Over. Easy over. They're playing the Chiefs. The Chiefs just bleed running back production to the receiving game. There's no one else on the team that's going to be established as a pass catcher besides Amon-Ra St. Brown. Of course they're going to use Gibbs. And I think that the easiest point is like they hated Swift. Swift was still somehow good on a per efficiency basis. Oh my God, what happens if they put a guy that they actually like in the Swift role? That's Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm all on board, especially with some of these other running backs kind of falling in rankings because of some of these signings. Gibbs, for me, is looking that much more appealing.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to spoil a little bit of the rest of the episode. The tight ends are not going to get any love this episode, but another quarterback will.
They lose leagues for you.
Rarely will we are. Travis Kelce is the only league winner. You can make a debate for Mark Andrews, but that's not groundbreaking. Di, you're going to talk about another quarterback, though. I'm interested to hear the case that you make for this quarterback being a league winner this year.
It's Danny Dimes. And I know I just lost about half of you listening to this, so I just need you to tune in real quick. Daniel Jones last year was the quarterback 9 overall with only 15 passing touchdowns and 3,200 passing yards. Like, it's the most gross quarterback stat line ever, and he still finished top 10. And he currently goes like quarterback 14 somewhere in there. And it's probably because when you have guys like Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, and Matt Stafford, potentially, you could throw his name in there. They all finished outside the top 10 last year. So I can understand why he's going later in drafts. But the thing with Daniel Jones, I mean, it can be simplified as rushing production, but it's also the fact that he was first in true completion percentage last year of all quarterbacks. And I think that is just that can be attributed to Brian Daboll coming in and really resetting the offense and, giving this offense some life. And you look at the weapons that he has, right? He loses Kenny Golladay. He loses Richie James, which are, in the grand scheme of things, those 2 players are minimal and minor losses, right? He adds Paris Campbell. He adds Jalen Hyatt. And, oh, yeah, that's right. The Giants went out and traded for Darren Waller, okay? And I know Darren Waller is not the Darren Waller of a couple of years ago, but Darren Waller is still the best weapon on that Giants team right now. So he gets better weapons. His offensive line is going to be better too, right? He's got bookend tackles, Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas. The Giants did go get the best center in the draft and John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. So the interior is going to be better too. So I think year 2 of Brian Daboll, right, and where we saw Josh, I'm not going to compare Daniel Jones to Josh Allen, but if Josh Allen can go from low teens in points per game his rookie season to a top 10 quarterback finish and borderline top 5 his second year, I just think with Brian Daboll at his side, Daniel Jones is such a value right now when it comes to quarterbacks that you can just build up your team and just get as many good players as you can. And then you take Daniel Jones as your quarterback. I don't see why that's such a bad option to go with this year. And like, if you can get a Jordan Addison and then punt and then get Daniel Jones later in your draft, like I think that's a fairly solid draft strategy to go with.
See, and I think, and I come back to what we've kind of been touching on throughout the episode of like, what do we define a league winner as? Because I think about with Andrew talking about Deshaun Watson, like I think we know Deshaun Watson has top 5 upside this year. I don't know if Daniel Jones does, because when you look at what they're going to ask him to do this year, I mean, Cameron, you brought this up on a previous episode. They brought in 1,700 slot wide receivers this year for Daniel Jones to just make little dink and dunk passes to, right? Like they're not asking him to stretch the field, and Daboll isn't going to, Josh Allen. Like again, I know you're not making the direct comparison, but Josh Allen can swing the ball around the yard. They're not going to ask Daniel Jones to do that. So I think, could we see an increase in touchdowns this year from 15? I sure freaking hope we do, because that's just an ugly number. But I question how high the ceiling is just based on how dynamic the Giants are going to be as a passing offense, not just a complete offense, but a passing offense. That's my only concern. But I also understand where you're coming from the factor of like, if this guy's going as a quarterback 15 in drafts, like if you're going to choose to punt on quarterback, Daniel Jones is your guy you want after that. So just my initial concerns and thoughts. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on top of that with the little bit of time we have left.
No, I mean, I think that the case for Daniel Jones is really good because he's in a better situation than he was last year. So I think that he's a screaming value in drafts. And honestly, I think he can be a top because of the rushing. Like, that's the thing I keep going back to, guys. Like, if the quarterback is running the ball, they can score so many points so fast and close the gap. It's when you have these players that are overvalued because of how good they are as passers that don't have rushing. Tom Brady last year. Tom Brady threw the ball more than anybody last year and was a bust in fantasy. How does that happen? Oh, because he didn't throw touchdowns. Like, that's the thing. But if he had run a little bit, then he would have been fine. So Daniel Jones, again, if he throws 25 touchdowns, which as a starting NFL quarterback, like that's not a lot to ask. And then he carries over the rushing that he did last year, which I'm a little skeptical of if he does because they have a long-term investment in him. So that's the only concern I have for that. But if he is still running the ball, like I think he can be a top 5 quarterback. You're never going to convince me that a rushing quarterback can't be top 5 because it's the easiest path for any fantasy quarterback to hit that mark.
I cannot refute anything there because that is just 100% true. Quarterbacks who can get it done with their legs will be successful in fantasy football. It's as simple as that. I'm going to fly through my last league winner here because we do got to get Andrew out of here. Not that we don't want him to hang around longer, but I digress. Last league winner, Keenan Allen. I'm going to keep this one short and simple. I might just go back and post edit this and just take Andrew's argument for Jerry Jeudy and just copy and paste it here because we look at Keenan Allen from week 11 on last season. Wide receiver 3 overall, first interceptions on the second most targets. He was 5th in air yards and 5th in yards after the catch as well. This just is very Amon-Ra-esque to me as well. Now, I get it. We're talking about 30-plus-year-old wide receiver here who, I get it, shows up on the injury report more often than we would like. But last year was the first year since 2016 that he's missed more than 2 games in a season. Like, just because he shows up on the injury report doesn't mean he doesn't produce. Like we go back 2021, the wide receiver 11, 2020, the wide receiver 14 and the wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game, wide receiver 6 in 2019, wide receiver 12 in 2018, wide receiver 3 in 20. Like this is a guy who has got it done time and time and time again. And now you bring in Kellen Moore. I get it's easy to make jokes that he shoved Ezekiel Elliott out there to be a blocker and it just the most ridiculous play in NFL history. There's going to be plenty to go around here. Herbert threw 700 times last year. I certainly think Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott because Kellen Moore during his time in Dallas, 4th in passing offense, 2nd in scoring. Like, I'm not concerned about Quentin Johnson either. I'm just throwing out like literally anything that's coming to my mind right now because he's not a world-beating Jamar Chase, not a world-beating Jalen Waddle. Like Keenan is still the one in this offense. He's going to be Justin Herbert's safety valve. He's going to be the lead target getter on this team. And if he was the wide receiver 3 from week 11 on after his injury last year, he showed me that he can do it again. I have no clue why he's going as a wide receiver 19. That's just another free discount we're getting, just like a guy like Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
I left him speechless. We'll wrap out the episode there. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Thank you again to Andrew for joining us, Andrew Erickson of FantasyPros. One more time for the people, Andrew, where can the people find you and all your work that you do?
Yep, I'm over on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Andrew Erickson _. Same thing on Instagram, TikTok, all the social media platforms, and all my written work, YouTube, over at fantasypros.com, the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, and also check me out on Betting Pros, doing the Betting Pros Primer this year.
Oh.
So, a little tongue-in-cheek with Derek Brown's Fantasy Pros Primer. So we'll see which one does better, but, bet on me.
Oh,
Tell me there's going to be a poll on the Fantasy Pros Twitter about which one they actually like better. Can we get that to happen?
Thanks for tuning in. Social media guy.
Thanks again for tuning in to today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. We're at FF Fellas on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it now. The FF Fellas on Instagram. Hey, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, make sure you do that. Turn on those notifications. You'll be alerted when new episodes are up. And if you listen to the audio podcast, we thank you so much for that. If you could subscribe, leave a nice little review, helps us out tremendously. We will see you all next week. Is that we're doing a mock draft episode next week? Mock draft episode next week. I'm making the executive decision. We'll see you all then. Deuces.
Deuces.